I'd like to call this meeting of the Festus City Council to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
I'm not hearing roll
Car-
call.
Carrie, we can barely hear you.
I can't hear at all.
Carrie, is like your mic is not on, it sounds like.
Councilman Dennis,
Here.
Councilman Venz,
Here.
Councilman Cook,
Here.
Councilman Tennant.
The flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands,
one nation,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So Greg, we are not hearing the mayor now.
Excuse me.
Approval of the consent agenda. We have approval of warrants for $1,191,213.52.
So moved.
So move.
I'll need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Second,
Been made and seconded. All the roll call, please.
Councilman Boyer. Yes. Councilman Weiner,
yes.
Councilman Dennis,
Yes.
Councilman Venz,
Yes.
Councilman Cook,
Yes.
Councilman Tennant.
Yes. The motion passes. Remarks of visitors.
Sir, I included in your packet a gentleman by the name of Cletus Pippin had contacted actually Carrie first and then myself following that about the McCullough project. He was invited to join us on the Zoom call as well. This was mainly just to give you some background on what they're trying to do. They're looking to get a 501c3 status. They don't have that yet. We did direct them to perhaps contact the Tanglefoot Association or the Chamber of Commerce. But really, more than anything else, you have his email there. If there's any information that individually the council or the mayor would like to provide to Mr. Pippin to help him get this project rolling, it's included in your packet. Like I said, he was invited to join us on the Zoom call tonight and did not.
Hey, Greg, this is Mike. On what level can the county, or excuse me, forgive me, can the city endorse this and participate in this project by chance?
Mike, that's a good question. The main reason he reached out to me in the first place was they were looking absent of 501c3. They're wanting to, he was under the impression that the city was a 501c3 and that we could assist them as far as a place to keep their funds, which we cannot. And we're not a 501c3. So we'll do everything we can. Certainly at the end of the day, I let them know that the mayor and the council were supportive of the project from the standpoint that we've talked in the past about ways to remember the McCulloughs. So I would think moving forward, if they can get their kind of their financial house in order, and then they have the ability to raise funds, that we could certainly try to help facilitate that in some way.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Is there any other questions right now? If not, we'll go on to bids. BS&A timesheet module.
Yes, sir. This is, as we've discussed, some of the items that we're looking at to try to make our processes work a little better, certainly from a remote ability. This is the timesheet module. It allows the employees to be able to log in as opposed to using paper timesheets, which is what we use now. It's a very hands-on process. The timesheets are handled by 3 to 4 people at a time by the time they're fully processed. This makes it a touchless situation. And this is something that we would also be applying for CARES Act funding on as well.
This is over Public Works and everywhere. Everyone has to clock in now and clock out, or
It's not a clock in, clock out. What it is when you fill out your timesheet, usually at the end of the pay period, you're going to mark down your 8 hours work, 8 hours vacation, 8 hours comp, 8 hours sick. So this is just, instead of writing it all down on a paper, an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, you'll be tracking that now through an app. They'll be able to use it on a smartphone. You can access it from a computer. They'll be able to do it remotely. So it makes the process, it computerizes the process, for lack of a better way of putting it.
okay, because I remember one time they were talking about having some kind of a tracking of a person clocking in, clocking out, because you never know when someone shows up, if they, who's a routine person always showing up 10, 15 minutes late, getting paid and leaving, so I've been a while, when I was here the first time, I heard about it, but I knew it never went no farther. So I didn't know if that's what this was going to do.
No, this automates the timesheet process. This is not a time clock. Our employees are pretty much on the honor system, and they all do a very good job of keeping track of their hours. But what this does is it certainly speeds up the payroll process. It allows us to do the payroll process a lot quicker. This was the Monday that all the timesheets came in. So you can imagine Margaret's office is full of 90 plus timesheets. This process, obviously, since it's all inside BS&A, which handles all of our payroll as well, if the timesheets are already in the system, then it's just, you take the hours from the timesheets, you put it over here on this module where the payroll is done, and payroll gets done a lot faster, a lot fewer mistakes. It also allows the employees to be able to track or request time off. So it basically takes a very very labor-intensive process and turns it into a touchless, remote, electronic process. Obviously, if they leave a half day early, they need to make sure whatever time, if they work 7 hours instead of 8, that needs to be in the system. All the timesheets, of course, then go through a review process. So just as we have it now, department heads sign off on timesheets, they would be able to do that electronically now.
Does Stephanie have a backup system on that?
As far as something other than what
As-
this would be?
Yeah, something, say something on this year would go down or something, there's a backup saving system on it.
Well, the nice part about it, Dave, is that there are 2 separate modules. So the payroll module is one that we already have and use, but we're manually entering all that data in. Here, you have this separate module. You would have to have a catastrophic failure of the system to lose everything. Plus, we back everything up on the cloud as well. So you have some saving grace in there as well. Worst case scenario, if we have to go back to the paper in the event of an emergency, and things like that happen, you read about it in the news. If something like that happens, we would be able to have that as a backup as well.
Any other questions? Is there any other questions? The total of proposed is $10,425. Is that correct?
Plus, there's some possible travel expenses when the folks from BSNA come to do training, although right now they're doing that remotely. So that expense may be less. I think the total cost up front was $14,440, not to exceed that amount.
Hey, Greg, what fund would this come out of until we're reimbursed by CARES?
Say that again, Mike?
I apologize. What item of the budget would this come out of until we're reimbursed for CARES? I'm going through my budget list and I don't see it. So I didn't know where you're.
Sure. This is actually in the new budget. It was under capital expense for administration.
Okay.
But it would be CARES Act eligible.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So the total we're approving tonight is 14,400.
440. Yeah, not to exceed that amount.
14,440.
440.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the bid from BSNA for $14,440.
So moved.
Motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilman Boyer,
Yes.
Councilman Weiner,
Yes.
Councilman Dennis,
Yes.
Councilman Venz,
Yes.
Councilman Tenen,
Yes.
Councilman Cook.
Yes.
Motion carries. Tonight for ordinances and resolutions, we have ordinance bill number 4601 on the agenda. Would the clerk please read the bill?
Bill number 4601, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Festus, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to enter into and execute the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission municipal agreement with the City of Festus, Missouri, incorporating said agreement as a part of this ordinance, prescribing the conditions thereto, and establishing an effective date.
Staff report, please.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you. What you have before you is a maintenance agreement with MoDOT. They want to do some work outside of their right-of-way, so that means it's our right-of-way. They want to install a guardrail and a sidewalk, replacing an existing one for some work that they're doing adjacent. And this is an agreement that would allow them to install that with the understanding that we would be required to maintain it if that can happen.
So when they complete this, then we take it all over after that.
Just the section that's in our right-of-way.
In our
They still
right-of-way.
maintain theirs within their right-of-way.
Okay.
So that part that's there now that they're gonna replace, I'm assuming that's gonna be a lot nicer than what's there and
Yes, sir.
wider, and
Yeah.
that we were hoping that it would look like that coming all the way down.
That is exactly what.
Yeah, boy, that's crappy with the one that's there now. I was glad to see that when I was looking at that.
Is there any other discussion? If not, could I entertain a motion to waive the rules, to suspend the rules and read Bill 4601 for the second time in title only?
So moved.
Second it?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Madam Clerk, would you please read Bill 4601 for the second time?
Bill number 4601, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Festus, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to enter into and execute the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission municipal agreement with the City of Festus, Missouri, incorporating said agreement as part of this ordinance, prescribing the conditions thereto, and establishing an effective date. Councilman Tenen.
Yes.
Councilman Cook.
Yes.
Councilman Venz.
Yes.
Councilman Dennis.
Yes.
Councilman Weiner.
Yes.
Councilman Boyer.
Yes.
Motion passes. Second ordinance we have tonight is Bill 4602 on the agenda. Would the clerk please read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 4602, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Festus, Missouri, amending Chapter 230 and Chapter 510 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Festus to amend certain provisions relating to permits for park facilities and permits for the use of city streets and parking lots within city limits, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances that conflict herewith, and establishing an effective date.
Bill 4602 is now open for discussion. Could I have a staff report?
I'm going to turn it over to Brian Malone, who crafted this ordinance. This is after our discussions about basically pandemics in public places. Brian?
Yes, thank you, Greg. Good evening, everyone. And before I get started, wanted to take just a quick second and introduce my colleague, Christopher Bedell, who's joining us via Zoom tonight. Christopher is an associate at my firm. Christopher also recently passed the bar exam, so I'm going to be, he's already helped me with a few projects, and he's going to be helping me more often with Festus-related stuff in the future. So I wanted to introduce all of you to Christopher. Christopher also helped me out with this ordinance as well. After our discussion a few weeks ago, there was a desire expressed to have some set guidelines for issuances of permits for use of city property, particularly during a pandemic or a public health emergency. We reviewed the city's ordinances, and the city did have some ordinances in place with regard to renting parks and park facilities. So we've added some provisions specifically related to when there is a public health emergency or a pandemic, and we've drafted it in such a way that it's pretty broad. It can be a public health emergency or a pandemic as determined by the city administrator. If the state or the county or the United States has declared a state of emergency, then those provisions go into effect. And what it requires is that the applicant for a permit needs to submit to the city a public health plan, including some of the criteria listed in the ordinance. We've prepared it in such a way that the plan has to include one or more of the following, and then it lists a number of different options, including that they limit the number of people who will attend, that they require social distancing, that they require attendees to wear face masks, that they have appropriate hand washing and sanitary stations, that provisions are made for safe delivery of food and beverages. I've drafted it so that none of these are necessarily mandatory, but they'll have to do at least one. And then the city administrator can review the plan. And if he's concerned that there's going to be a public health threat, he can either deny the request or say, I'm only going to approve it if you add additional health and safety related provisions as set forth in the ordinance. The benefit of that is I think it puts the city in a position of being flexible depending on what the event, what the activity is going to be at the event, because what measures are required is going to depend a lot on exactly what is being proposed for the city's property. We also turned to Chapter 510 of the city's code, in which has some has a provision relating to renting out of city streets. We've added in some language about renting out city-owned parking lots for festivals and celebrations, and we've required similar provisions for a pandemic, that the applicant be required to have a safety plan for the city to approve before we issue the permit, either to shut down the city street or a city-owned parking lot. So that's what the ordinance before you tonight would do. That being said, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
I guess one thing that comes to mind is, does that put too much on Greg as far as if he denying the one to where he takes a bunch of heat if he doesn't like the plan, or you know what I'm saying? If someone comes
Sure.
to him with a plan and says, we'd like to do this event, and well, Greg said no, but we want to take it to the council now. Would
Right,
the orders
there is-
give him the teeth to say yay or nay, and that's the end of it?
Well, I did include an appeal provision in there, and I'm going to try to pull up the code real quick because I don't recall if it went directly to the council or if it went to a separate board. that was already established by ordinance. If you'll just bear with me for one moment. But no, and I also put in there that if he's going to deny a permit or require additional conditions, that the decision be in writing. And that's just to make sure that there is a adequate and articulable basis for the denial. And that's just to protect the public, to give them confidence that it's not just going to be denied because Greg doesn't like the group or doesn't like the event. He'll have to give a written reason why he's going to deny the permit. And then that's subject to being appealed, and that can be overruled if it's just an arbitrary denial. And yes, I looked at section 23340, which is deals with appeals, and that gives the applicant the right to appeal to the city council. So in the event that somebody is denied a permit, Greg would issue a written decision saying, I'm denying it because I think it's going to be unsafe because there's not going to be adequate social distancing. There's not going to be adequate hand washing stations, or because of the number of people, we want there to be masks at the event. The applicant could then appeal that decision to the council, and Greg could explain his basis for denying it. You could hear the reasons why the applicant says, here's why we don't think we need to do all that for this event. And then the council can make its decision. And that's an important, having that appeal provision, even if it adds to the bureaucracy, it's important in terms of preserving our ability to defend the ordinance if it's ever challenged. Because when you put, I guess, all of the authority in one person, it becomes easy for somebody to challenge it, to say it's arbitrary and it vests too much discretion in one official who can deny it without adequate recourse.
Yeah, and it makes it tough on him too, because
Right.
you know how it is. It don't work out. It's like,
Sure.
well, I'm not following the rules. It's your fault,
Right.
you know, and that. So
Does this change the game any? Before we were we were using the guidance of the Jefferson County Health Department, and now it's still like an entity that can be considered in making a decision for Greg, but now we have the President of the United States, the mayor, county executive, governor of Missouri, and so on. So will we be able to follow our guidelines like we have because of this change?
Sure. So what the reference to the county executive and the governor and the president, that's just someone who could conceivably declare a state of emergency. It doesn't necessarily need to be all of them. It's just meant to be if any of them have declared a state of emergency. And even if they haven't, the mayor could have declared a state of emergency, or Greg could have determined that there's a public health pandemic. So even if none of those entities say there's a public health crisis, if there's something that's happening that's just specific to Festus or just specific to the region, Greg could say, based on that, I'm invoking this subdivision of the ordinance and saying that you need to submit a public health plan. As far as what recommendations you can follow, I put in the ordinance that the city administrator, in making his decision, can rely upon guidance from the Centers for Disease Control, the Jefferson County Health Department, or any other appropriate entity, or the Missouri Health Department. Doesn't say he has to do whatever they say. It says he can review their guidance. And so if they, that can kind of just form the basis, if Greg's saying, well, I think this is an event that should have masks, for instance, and if they say, well, why? Greg can say, well, because the CDC recommends that if you're having an event of over 30 people in under X square feet, that you should have masks. That's the kind of thing that he can use to rely upon as a basis to deny a permit or to recommend additional safety provisions.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Brian, this is Mike.
Yeah.
On page 32, section B.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of how that language states, because an individual can determine if it's a pandemic or not. It's their
Right.
discretion. I don't like that. I think it should be the governing body that makes that decision. I don't think it should be one person. And it clearly leaves a governing body out of the city of Festus. I don't support that. I think the council should be involved on a declaration of emergency. I don't believe one person should have that sole responsibility of declaring what they believe a pandemic is or isn't, because I want the council to remember this ordinance is for future councils until this gets changed, which also includes future administrations. So I believe we're kind of bypassing council on this and putting a lot of power on a few individuals. I don't like that language. I support this resolution or this ordinance. I'm not a big fan of the language.
Thank you, Councilman. That's a fair point. And I think I will just say the reason I drafted it the way I did is because I think my view is that sometimes a permit application might come in and decisions need to be made on a relatively quick time frame. Since council only typically will meet twice a month, I wanted to make sure that we weren't in a situation where we were waiting on such a declaration. But I understand your point, and as with the last with the current pandemic, we of course held a special meeting for an emergency declaration. So your point is well taken, and if that's the will of the council, if you'd rather, instead of saying, the mayor, the city administrator, or the county executive, or the governor, or the president can determine a state of emergency, you could certainly propose an amendment to say, in the event that the council determines that an emergency has exists. Just bear in mind that's the kind of thing a decision you'd have to make at a formal meeting before Greg could rely upon that.
Sure, understand. My biggest concern would be that it doesn't necessarily have to be classified as a pandemic. It can be a discretionary choice. That would be more of my concern as well. But I'm just one of 8, so I express my concerns, and thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
I think what I took from it was it kind of laid out a chain of command somewhat, and I just took it that we would be involved eventually. We would be briefed, and then it would go to Greg, to Sam, and then get to us as soon as possible. But I wouldn't have a problem that being spelled out. But that's the way I took it. We were somewhat following a chain of command.
My concern always is when we do an ordinance, it's always there permanently until it's repealed or an amendment.
Right.
So
Right.
that's-
I'm following you, Mike. I'm sure that Brian and Chris could put that in there and make it, to where we were involved. But I understand what you're saying. I'm certainly not taking anything for granted, but I think at some point we would be involved. We would have to be, because it's just, in the event that they had to make a decision, Greg, I'm sure, would get with Sam, and then Sam and Greg would get with all of us. But if it needs to be spelled out, that's just the way I took it.
And just to be clear, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, if nothing else, so the applicant, of course, since he has the ability to appeal a decision to the council, if the city administrator were to invoke this requirement in ordinary time when there's no pandemic or anything else like that, that would get appealed to the council, and the applicant's argument could just be, well, there's not a pandemic going on, and there's not a public health emergency, and the city administrator was wrong to conclude that there is one. Then that's a decision the council could override in appealing it. But I understand it's a policy decision rather than a legal decision as to who makes the declaration of an emergency, whether it be just the council or whether it be all of the people that I have listed in the ordinance.
After mayor, you could put mayor and city council.
You could. You would probably need to make, as it is, it's just right now that any one of those entities could make the
Right.
call. So if you want it to be just the council, you'd need to change the draft you have before you to say, in the event that the city council determines that there's a public health emergency or a pandemic.
See, by mere definition of emergency, it very well may have to be a decision that they have to snap to, Greg to Sam and then to us. And I God forbid such an emergency, but I do think we have to have that authority to where try to get us all together to make a decision or a vote. We couldn't do that immediately. We'd have to call an emergency meeting, which would take time. So I would think this would be, as spelled out, in the midst of a extreme emergency. So I do think we need to leave some discretion there, which I think the mayor by statute probably already has, and get to us as soon as, humanly possible. I don't think it would be a pandemic, but it may be some sort of an emergency where their decision needs to be made. And we don't want to bog that down and since be negligent because we put so many parameters on who could get the decision process going. So that's one of my concerns by mere definition of emergency.
But the definition in the language states emergency, pandemic or not. It's either or. That's my concern.
Mike, would it be beneficial if this just stuck with, we left this with the elected, so to speak? If we're talking about a public health emergency or pandemic, as determined by the mayor, the city council, the county executive, the governor, the president, it kind of leaves me in an administrative role as opposed to a rule-making role where at the end of the day, if you guys, the mayor, the governor, or the county executives declared some form of public health emergency, then all I have to do is follow, what's in section B, which says that they need to present a plan that needs to have some of these parameters in there. It's not a declaration being made by me. It's a declaration that's being made by essentially elected officials and just takes me out of the equation as far as determining whether or not it's a public health emergency or not. I don't know if that helps or not.
Well, I think Kevin's onto something, and I don't want to use the words "you" because I don't have any issues with your decision making. I'm more concerned 6 years down the road, 8 years down the road, we get new council, new city administrator. This ordinance, in my opinion, I'm just one though, is a little vague. So to answer your question, my only concern is if it's a pandemic or not, or an emergency or not. It can be one person's responsibility to deem if it's a safe event or not. That's my only concern. But again, I'm just one of 8, so I'm just expressing my concern.
Well, the only thing I'd like to add is, number one, that's why we have a city administrator. And number two, that's why we have a mayor. Sometimes decisions have to be made quickly, and the city administrator and myself get together, we make that decision. We do call you guys and let you know what's going on, and here's what we'd like to do. But sometimes a real emergency, we need to make decisions quickly. And I think this ordinance pretty much covers those things. I'm glad it's in the form that it is, and thank you, Councilman Weiner, for bringing this up 2 weeks ago that we needed to do something, and now we're doing something. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to suspend the rules and read Bill 4602 for the second time in title only?
So moved.
Motion's been made
Second?
and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, Madam Clerk, could you read Bill 4602 for the second time?
Bill number 4602, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Festus, Missouri, amending Chapter 230 and Chapter 510 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Festus to amend certain provisions relating to permits for park facilities and permits for the use of city streets and parking lots within city limits, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and establishing an effective date. Councilman Tenen. Councilman Cook.
No.
Councilman Venz.
Yes.
Councilman Dennis.
Yes.
Councilman Weiner,
Yes.
Councilman Boyer.
Motion passes 5 yes, 1 no. We have bill number 4603 on the agenda. Would the clerk please read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 4603, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Festus, Missouri, establishing the alley just north of 604 Ridge Avenue to be westbound traffic only to Joachim Street, establishing the placement of said one-way alley signs, and establishing an effective date.
Could we have the discussion? Chief?
This was brought up by Councilman Benz last week. I thought we had done this about 7 or 8 years ago. I guess we didn't. But what I did, I went out there and looked at it. When cars are parked on Ridge Avenue and you're coming eastbound, pulling out into Ridge, it's a narrow road and it's tough to see both ways. So I think we make it one way westbound only. That might alleviate a little bit of problems and keep from maybe having a traffic accident at that little intersection.
Yeah, I went up there today just to double check it. And like you said, that's an accident waiting to happen if we didn't do something. I mean,
It's
it's,
a narrow road.
yes, it is. And there's probably some other ones like that we probably need to, probably look at. Yeah, there's some other ones, but we'll discuss that another day. But
Chief, the only concern I have, I went there different times of the day. They're using their property and I guess it's somewhat our right of way as parking. I have no problem with it being one way as long as it says that you can't obstruct that way in, because there is an apartments at the end. And I know ever since I've been council, this comes up periodically, but they've made little driveways there. They park there. Now you're down to less than a car length or less than a car width to get in and out of there. So that would be my only request, that we say do not obstruct roadway with parking or whatever your suggestion for that is. Because I went there in the evening and they've had numerous cars parked there and you could barely get through. And I have somewhat of a small car. So that's one of my concerns. I don't have a problem with us making it one way as long as that continues to be a street and not a private parking spot, which I know in the past that there has been some issues there.
to that, the people told me the reason they did that, they got tired of people flying through there with kids out. So they figured by blocking or doing something to make someone slow down, that was the reason why they did it. And they explained that to the officers every time they came, and the officers pretty much agreed to them because they knew what was going on. But other than that, that was the only reason. Now, hopefully with this being a one-way, maybe it might stop this and they won't have to worry about doing that no more.
Well,
That's the
preceding you, Bobby, they're at one time they were trying to get the city to turn the property over and get rid of the street. So that issue would be a law enforcement issue, but I don't know how fast you can get going through there, to be honest with you. And at one time we had to ask them to move fence because we had a certain amount of right of way there.
Right.
So, I mean, if it's an issue of speeding, that's one thing, but to block a city street to slow people down, you can't do that. So there's a little more to this issue. Preceding even you being councilman when I first started,
Right.
We had a huge war over this issue. And we finally just said, no, it's a street. You got to leave it a street. You can't block it. You can't move your fence over to it. You can't take over the right of way. So that's my concern. I just don't know how fast you can get going. And then your solution is I'm going to block the street. So that's my concern. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I don't have a problem with the one way as long as they don't obstruct the street. Because remember, a fire truck can't get in there, an ambulance can't get in there. You know, it's not just those two residents, it's everybody around them that possibly could use that street. It's, it's a city street. It's an odd street, I grant it, but there's people down there. There's an apartment at the end of it there. That's giving them very little access to their area. If you jog around to get to Joachim, that, you know, there's another area where people live that come down a hill, like over by John's Butchers where we made it one way. It still has to be open. If there's a speeding problem, Tim can handle those issues. He does it every day. So that's my biggest concern.
Kevin, there's ordinances on the book about obstructing the flow of traffic. And we had a situation, a block earlier about 4 months ago, where one of the residents was parking in the alley between Joachim and Huber. And we just went to the one property owner and told him you can't do that. I think the problem can be solved if that is an issue, because it's not a high traffic area. There's just 1 or 2 residents that live in that area. We can approach them and just say, hey, you can't park in the alley, and the obstruction, the flow of traffic ordinance will cover anything that's in the way.
Very well. I'm good with that, Chief. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to suspend the rules and read Bill 4603 for the second time in title only?
So moved.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Madam Clerk, would you please read Bill 4603 for the second time?
Bill number 4603, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Festus, Missouri, establishing the alley just north of 604 Ridge Avenue to be westbound traffic only to Joachim Street, and establishing the placement of said one-way alley signs and establishing an effective date. Councilman Benz.
Yes.
Councilman Cook.
Yes.
Councilman Tenen.
Yes.
Councilman Dennis.
Yes.
Councilman Boyer.
Yes.
Councilman Weiner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Public Works Director, would you ensure that those one-way signs get put up? Thank you. Okay. New business. Appointments. I would like to appoint Kevin Dennis to the Jefferson County Water Authority. And he will be replacing Councilman Underwood on that board. But I have a motion to approve that appointment.
Making a
So
motion.
moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Councilman Dennis, you are now on the Board of Directors of the Jefferson County Water Authority.
Those are some big shoes to fill for our friend, Mr. Underwood. I will do my best.
All righty. Mayor and City Council report, or any old business?
No, sir.
No old business? Councilman Boyer,
Have nothing at this time, sir.
thank you. Councilman Weiner,
I was actually hoping that Councilman Cook would go first, but one of the things that Mike and I have recently talked about is email notifications, and I'm gonna start off, Mike. I'm sorry if I rain on your parade a little bit here by getting this out, but I think that there are a lot of people in the city that don't necessarily have a communication of what's going on. And if you're not on social media, for instance, if you're not on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or Messenger or whatever they may be, you're not going to know what Greg or other people are sending out. So if we could have an email sign up list that would be able to inform people of the events going on, so that it would just show up in their email, I think that would be a plus for the city to have for our communications. And I'll let Mike expand upon that when
Brian,
he has his.
we have that capability in some ways through our website. Obviously, if people set up an account through our website, we can use that for email notifications. We haven't done that, but it's something we can do. Our website's also through Civic Plus, and something that Mike and I talked about earlier today. And Mike, I don't mean to steal your thunder, but they have a platform called Civic Alert. It allows you to essentially hit all those platforms, plus can send text messages, can send emails. It's an additional cost. It's something similar to what we're already paying for with our Code Red. The Code Red platform that we do have, that we do use, but is designed more for emergencies, whether it's a car crash or car fire, or an area where you need to stay away from due to some activity, or because of weather alerts. You can get weather alerts through Code Red. So there's a lot of other ways that we can do it. It's just I guess, kind of like the conversation you and I've had a number of times, Brian, is which channel do you want to hit people through?
Sure.
Whether it's, we're using the website, the social media platforms, the newsletter that goes out monthly. I don't know if there's, if emails or text messages are kind of the next couple of channels we need to hit, but there are certainly ways we can do that.
Sure. I know that it's a large undertaking, and I think that I just believe that to be able to cover like texting, for instance, or emails, that would, and it may be a little cumbersome to get that started with the new system, but it's really onerous right now in our system the way it is to perhaps be involved with that. So however it gets done, I'm just happy it's being addressed, and that they'll have that our citizens will have advanced techniques to be able to know what's going on in real time. Chief Lewis, thank you for your help with speeding throughout town. I know that you're backed up with a lot of requests for that, but thank you for that. I'm looking forward to seeing our new speeding miles per hour signs that we've purchased this year, for those to be purchased and deployed, so that we can slow people down too. And then finally, in that regard, I'm looking forward to seeing our traffic calming program hit the ground running too, and have a way to address the problems that we're encountering with different street problems and speeding problems and so on throughout our city. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Councilman Weiner. Councilman Vins. Councilman Dennis.
Nothing at this time.
Thank you.
Nothing but welcomes and thank yous. Once again, welcome, Christopher. Glad to have you aboard. Look forward to working with you. And I want to reiterate on Brian's comment about the speeding. I've noticed the complaint areas that we brought up in Ward 3. There's definitely more of a police presence. And thank you for that, Chief. I know you guys are busy, but it definitely is helping. I have not had one complaint since we brought it up last time. So thank you. I wanted to thank the fire chief and his operation. I was swimming last week at the Y, and the fire alarm went off. A lot of people had to go outside wet. A speedy response. I was very proud to be a part of the city of Festus. They set up their ladder truck. They had the issue cleared, and everybody was able to go in. So I wanted to thank them. Want to say something about our street water department. They got that culvert cleaned out over there behind Ridge at our maintenance shed. A lot of people were very thankful for that. I know they're busy also, but no matter what we say, our people seem to come through, all of our people. So I guess I'm a little biased, but I think I'd put Festus up against anyone. We got the best go on things, and I just want to say thank you. You're making the people of Ward 3 and the people of the city of Festus, they certainly appreciate all your service and the good deeds that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Tenen.
I have nothing, sir.
Thank you. And Councilman Cook.
Thank you, sir. Just one thing, please. Greg, thanks for talking about the system we're trying to work on. I was contacted by a Jessica Dillard and a Sarah Harris. They're more into texting than they are on social media. I'm not sure how detailed we want to try to get with all of this, but if you can come up with a format and what the intention is and kind of update us, I would greatly appreciate it so I can pass it along to them. And thank you to our Public Works for cleaning out Ridge. I got a few phone calls on it as well. And I agree with Kevin. It seems like our crews from the fire to street and water and even to the girls in City Hall and Public Works are doing a very good job. I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
And I will second all the good things that have been said about our departments. Does our financial officer want to say anything? Okay. Matt, do you have anything? Chief Lewis? Chief Kramer?
Video short, but took a lot of time to put together. Shout out to Captain Brown and firefighter Wood for putting that together, the majority of it. Assisted by a lot of the other guys and gals on the department, showing the different things. We were looking at video out to the elementary school. We're not allowed to see the first, second, third graders this year personally. So all their equipment and hopefully next video. That's one of the shout out to the guys putting in all that work.
All righty, thank you, Chief. Is there anything else from anyone? I'd like to say that we reach out to our city of Hillsborough who lost their building inspector, Mr. Dieter, in the fire, his whole family. It was tragic. Is there anybody else have any comments? I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion's been made,
Second.
seconded. To adjourn, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion's carried. We are adjourned.